The world never plays fair. No matter how honest you are, someone will betray you. No matter how hard you work, someone will steal your credit. No matter how kind you are, someone will use your generosity as weakness. That is not pessimism. That is physics. Power flows toward those who understand the rules, not those who wish for better ones. Those who survive this game are not the most talented. They are not the most moral. They are the ones who see the field clearly, adjust without apology, and strike when the moment is ripe. They survive, and those who survive, they rule. This is not about becoming cruel. It is about developing what I call dark intelligence. Dark intelligence is not manipulation for sport. It is the quiet awareness of human behavior layered with ruthless self-honesty. It is the ability to listen more than you speak, to watch more than you react, to withhold more than you reveal. It is the kind of intelligence that stays in the shadows until the sun hits just right, then steps forward, not with noise, but with precision. But before we go further, let me be crystal clear. This is not a manual for destruction. This is a shield forged in fire for those who refuse to be prey. You do not learn these truths to hurt others. You learn them because the world already hurts the unprepared. Drop this affirmation in the comments right now. I buried the boy today. Now let us unlock the secrets. You do not grow by adding, you grow by subtraction. You kill the version of yourself that begs for approval, apologizes for existing, and confuses kindness with weakness. This is not metaphor. This is surgery. You do not rehabilitate the boy. You embalm him, lay him in a pine box, and lower him into the ground with no priest, no eulogy, just cold dirt, and the quiet understanding that something had to die for the man to breathe. Machiavelli once said, "A wise ruler ought never to keep faith when by so doing it would be against his interest." Now let me explain what that really means in your life. It is not a call to lie. It is a call to evolve. Your loyalty, your honesty, your fairness, these are not universal virtues. They are tactical choices, and the boy clings to them like commandments, even when they cost him everything. He says yes when he means no. He explains himself when silence would protect him. He offers context to people who only want leverage. He believes if he just gives more time, more energy, more forgiveness, he will finally be seen as worthy. But here is the brutal truth. People do not reward generosity. They exploit consistency of access. Think about last Tuesday when your coworker asked you to cover their shift again, and you said sure, even though you were exhausted. You told yourself it was the right thing to do, but what did they do? They told the manager you are so reliable, while quietly resenting you for never pushing back. Or remember that conversation with your friend who vented for 40 minutes, then changed the subject when you mentioned your own stress. You stayed silent because you did not want to seem selfish, but what you really did was teach them your pain is optional and theirs is mandatory. That is not humility. That is self-erasure. And it is exhausting, because every time you betray your own boundaries, you feed the boy another year of life. Most people try to improve by setting goals, adding habits, or reading more books. They treat growth like interior design, fresh paint on rotting walls. But the man understands the foundation is cracked. You do not build on top of weakness. You excavate it. Instead of saying, "I will try to be more assertive," you say, "I bury the version of me who fears being disliked." Instead of promising to speak up more, you vow to stop giving oxygen to conversations that drain your clarity. Notice the difference. One is a wish, the other is a verdict. This does not mean becoming cold or cruel. It means shifting your loyalty from external validation to internal sovereignty. Let us say your family expects you at every holiday gathering, even when it leaves you emotionally hollow. The boy shows up every time, smiling through the tension, whispering to himself, "Next year, I will set a boundary." The man books a solo trip 2 weeks prior and says simply, "I am unavailable this year," no justification. No guilt, no over-explaining, just clean absence and watch what happens. The first time, they panic. The second time, they negotiate. The third time, they adjust, because you taught them your presence is not guaranteed. It is earned by respect. In professional settings, this is even sharper. The boy sends follow-up emails after being ghosted by a client. He over-delivers on scope, hoping gratitude will follow. The man delivers exactly what was agreed upon, then waits. If the client wants more, they initiate and pay the premium. This is not arrogance, it is calibration. You are not punishing them, you are revealing the market value of your attention. What happens when you master this is profound. People begin to treat you differently. Not because you changed your tone, but because you changed your gravity. You stop radiating need and start radiating choice. And need repels power. Choice attracts it. You walk into a room, and people sense it. You are not there to be approved. You are there to assess and decide. But here is the warning. Never sacrifice your core values in the name of rebirth. The boy dies not so you can become a tyrant, but so you can become trustworthy to yourself first. The goal is not to harden your heart. It is to stop letting strangers live rent-free in it, remember. You are not killing innocence, you are killing compliance. The boy pleads, the man proposes. You are never fully legible to others. You reveal only what serves your position and conceal the rest, not out of fear, but out of strategy. This is not about lying. It is about editing your truth, like a sculptor removes excess stone to reveal the figure within. The boy blurts his dreams, his doubts, his insecurities to anyone who asks. Believing transparency builds trust. But the man knows full exposure invites exploitation. He speaks in layers, not lies, each word chosen, not for its honesty, but for its utility, Machiavelli once said. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. Let me break that down for you in real time. Think about the last job interview you had, or the pitch you gave to a potential client. The boy walks in, nervous, sweat on his palms, rehearsing how to sound authentic. He volunteers weaknesses unprompted. I am still learning time management. I tend to overthink things. He thinks this makes him relatable. But what it actually does is hand the other person a blueprint for how to pressure him later. The man walks in, calm, posture relaxed, shoulders loose, and when asked about challenges, he says, I prioritize precision over speed, which means I vet decisions thoroughly, but once committed, I execute without hesitation. Notice. No admission of flaw, just a reframing of strength as caution. Here is what happens in most conversations. People use small talk to map your vulnerabilities. They ask, how are you really doing? Not because they care, but because fatigue leaks truth. And the boy answers, I am exhausted. My landlord raised the rent, my dog is sick, my project is behind, he thinks, sharing builds connection. But what he is really doing is broadcasting that he is available for extraction. The man says, I am recalibrating a few things, but momentum is building. Thank you for asking, then turns the question back on them. How has your quarter been? Shifting focus without resistance. Think about the most intriguing people you know, the ones others lean in to hear. They are not louder, they are quieter. They pause before answering. They smile without revealing why. They change subjects with grace, not evasion. They do not overshare. They underpromise and overdeliver, and people chase them not because they are mysterious by accident, but because they are intentional by design. Most people confuse discretion with dishonesty. They think if you are not pouring your heart out on social media or crying in the break room, you are fake. But the truth is, raw emotion is not strength. It is signal noise. The man feels deeply. He just refuses to weaponize his own vulnerability, or let others do it for him. He shares intimacy in stages, like unlocking a vault, one tumbler at a time. First trust in action, then trust in word, then trust in silence. But here is the boundary. Never conceal so deeply that you isolate yourself completely. Discretion is a filter, not a fortress. If no one ever sees your humanity, you become a ghost, not a leader, remember. The mask is not worn to hide the face. It is worn to protect the mission. You do not bind yourself to people, you bind yourself to outcomes. You honor commitments but never confuse them with chains. This is the moment you stop saying, "I will always have your back," and start asking, "Is this alliance still serving the mission?" The boy pledges allegiance like a knight in a fairy tale, swearing fealty to friends, bosses, mentors, even when they stop earning it. He believes loyalty is a virtue in itself. But the man knows loyalty without discernment is just delayed. Betrayal of the self, Machiavelli once said. Men are ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, covetous. Do not flinch at that. He is not condemning humanity. He is diagnosing it. And once you accept this diagnosis, you stop taking betrayal personally and start designing around it. Let me give you a real example. Last year, a startup founder I advised poured 2 years and $80,000 into his co-founder covering rent during dry spells, defending him in board meetings, even lying to investors to buy him time. Why? Because they were college roommates, and he believed friendship was the foundation of partnership. Then the co-founder quietly negotiated a side deal with a competitor and walked away with equity and silence. The boy would call him a traitor and spiral into bitterness. The man says, "I misread the contract. I assumed emotional capital would override self-interest. But money and survival always rewrite sentiment. Here is what happens when loyalty becomes unconditional. You become an asset, not a partner. People keep you close, not because they value you, but because you are predictable. Your yes is guaranteed, and guarantees are the first thing cut in a crisis. Think about that friend who only calls when they need a favor, a ride to the airport, help moving a couch, advice after they have ignored your texts for weeks. The boy says, "Sure, no problem," every time, because he fears being labeled selfish. The man says, "I can help if you give me 3 days' notice and cover gas." This is not coldness, it is recalibration. He is not rejecting the person, he is redefining the terms. Most people treat loyalty like a tattoo, permanent ink on the skin of every relationship, but the man treats it like a lease renewable only when both parties uphold their end. The boy says, "Blood is thicker than water," the man says, "Integrity is thicker than blood." And when an uncle makes racist jokes at dinner, the boy laughs nervously to keep peace. The man stands, says, "I am not comfortable with that," and walks out not as punishment, but as policy. Instead of asking, "How can I keep them happy?" you ask, "How does this relationship move me closer to who I am becoming?" Instead of defending someone's bad behavior because they were there for you once, you say, "I honor what we built then, but I cannot endorse what you are building now." In business, this is non-negotiable. The boy stays at a toxic job because his manager believes in him, even as promotions go to less qualified people who play politics better. The man updates his resume the moment he notices patterns, not after the betrayal, but before it. He builds external options, not out of disloyalty, but out of self-respect. Because power does not reside in the throne, it resides in the ability to walk away from it. What happens when you master this is freedom. You stop carrying resentment because you stop over-investing. You become generous with your support, but ruthless with your standards. People begin to treat you with more care, not because you demanded it, but because they sense your presence is elective, not automatic. But here is the warning. Never use this as an excuse to abandon responsibility or ditch people at the first sign of friction. Loyalty is conditional, but commitment is sacred. When you sign a contract, when you make a vow, when you take on a dependent, you fulfill it not out of emotion, but out of honor. The breach is not in leaving. It is in leaving without integrity. Remember, loyalty should be a verb, not a vow. Something you choose daily, not something you inherit once. You let others speak first, not because you lack words, but because their speech tells you where the ground is soft and where to step. Silence is not emptiness. It is containment. It is the space where power consolidates before it moves. The boy feels compelled to fill every pause with explanation, apology, or agreement, terrified that quiet means irrelevance. The man sits in stillness like a predator who already knows the prey will run toward him if he stays motionless long enough. Machiavelli once said, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." But here is the twist. The wise man also waits longer than the fool dares to, because timing is not just action, it is restraint. Let me show you how this plays out in real time. Imagine you are in a salary negotiation. The manager opens with, "We love your work, but budgets are tight this year." The boy panics and jumps in. "I understand things are hard. I am flexible. Maybe we could revisit in 6 months. Notice how he just negotiated against himself before the other side, even stated a number. The man says nothing. Just nods slowly, holds eye contact, and lets the silence stretch. 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5. The manager shifts in his chair, clears his throat, then adds, "But we could offer a 5% bump and a title change if you take on the new client portfolio." See, who just revealed their ceiling? Not by strategy, but by discomfort. This is not manipulation. It is physics. Pressure seeks release, and silence is the valve you refuse to open. Most people confuse listening with waiting to talk. They rehearse their reply while the other person is still speaking. Their eyes glaze over at the third sentence. Their foot starts tapping. They interrupt with a version of what they think the person meant, rather than what was said. The man listens not to respond, but to map. He hears the tremor in a colleague's voice when she mentions the CEO's name. He notices how a friend's laugh gets higher when she is lying. He catches the micro pause before someone says, "I am fine," and knows that 3 words just meant, "I am drowning." Think about the last argument you had with someone you care about. The boy raises his voice, doubles down on being right, and ends exhausted, still unheard. The man lowers his volume, lets the other person vent fully, and when the storm passes, says softly, "I hear you feel unheard, and I want to understand better." Not "did you hear me," but "do you feel heard?" Notice the pivot from defense to diagnosis. He does not win the argument. He dissolves it. Most people fear silence because they equate it with weakness or disengagement. But in reality, silence communicates authority. It says, I am not desperate for your approval. I am evaluating your offer. I do not need to prove myself in real time. The man does not rush to clarify a misunderstanding. He lets it sit, because confusion is a diagnostic tool. If someone misreads his intent, he watches how they act on that misreading before correcting them. Sometimes the correction is unnecessary, because their actions reveal their true motives. In social settings, this is even more potent. At a networking event, the boy introduces himself with rapid-fire credentials, trying to impress. The man asks one open question, then listens, really listens not just to words, but to emphasis, to what is omitted, to the shift in posture when a certain topic arises. He learns more in 90 seconds of silence than the boy does in 20 minutes of monologue. This does not mean becoming passive or withdrawn. Silence is active. It is the compression before expansion. You choose when to speak, because words lose value when they are abundant. But here is the warning. Never use silence as punishment or passive aggression. That is not control. That is cowardice. True silence is calm, deliberate, and followed by action, not omission, remember. Silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of strategy. You stop resisting discomfort and start using it as data. Every wound carries a message. If you are still breathing, you are being refined, not ruined. The boy treats pain like a verdict. He fails once and concludes, I am not cut out for this. He gets rejected and believes, I am unlovable. He is criticized and collapses into shame. But the man treats pain like a diagnostic readout. A spike in heart rate before a presentation is not fear. It is readiness. A knot in the stomach after a conversation is not guilt. It is misalignment. A dull ache in the chest when scrolling social media is not envy. It is evidence you are comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel, Machiavelli once said. There is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. And every time you try to grow, every time you challenge an old identity, your nervous system screams stop, because evolution feels like invasion. The boy interprets that scream as truth and retreats. The man interprets it as proximity. He knows the closer he gets to a breakthrough, the louder the resistance roars. Let me give you a real example. Last winter, a client of mine, a graphic designer, lost his biggest account after 5 years. The boy in him spiraled for 3 weeks, replaying emails, blaming himself, wondering if he should just go back to his parents' house and take the safe job at the credit union. But then he did something different. He sat down and wrote 3 questions, not why did this happen to me, but what did this reveal about my pricing? What did it expose about my client selection? And what boundary did I ignore that made this inevitable? He discovered he had been undercharging by 40%, taking on emotionally draining clients because he feared empty weeks, and saying no to scope creep because he thought generosity would build loyalty. None of that was true. His pain was not failure. It was feedback. Here is what happens when you misread pain as punishment. You medicate it, distract from it, or apologize for it. You binge-watch to numb the loneliness. You overwork to avoid the grief. You people-please to quiet the shame. But none of that heals. It just buries the signal deeper. Most people ask, how do I stop hurting? The man asks, what is this pain trying to teach me? Instead of avoiding the confrontation with his passive-aggressive co-worker, the boy stays quiet and develops insomnia. The man uses the sleeplessness as a cue. This is not about rest. This is about integrity and schedules. The conversation within 48 hours, not to win, but to release the toxin. In relationships, this is vital. The boy stays in a lukewarm partnership for 3 years because breaking up would hurt too much. He confuses endurance with virtue. But the man feels that quiet dread every Sunday night and says, "This is not love, this is inertia." And he ends it not with rage, but with reverence for his own time. What happens when you master this is resilience without bitterness. You stop keeping score of wounds and start cataloging lessons. You no longer say, "I have been hurt too much." You say, "I have been trained thoroughly. Every betrayal sharpened your discernment. Every failure refined your process. Every loss clarified your non-negotiables." But here is the warning. Never glorify suffering or seek pain as proof of worth. That is masochism, not mastery. The goal is not to suffer more, but to suffer smarter, to extract intelligence from injury before it calcifies into trauma. Remember, pain is the body's way of saying, pay attention, not give up. You do not announce your preparation. You do not seek validation for your discipline. You build in solitude because power built in darkness cannot be stolen by light. The boy live streams his grind, posts gym selfies at 5 a.m. shares his business plan in group chats, and asks for feedback on half-finished work. He confuses visibility with progress, but the man knows true authority is forged in the unseen hours, in the repetitions no one applauds, in the rewrites no one reads, in the decisions made alone at 3 in the morning when no audience exists to reward or ridicule him. Machiavelli once said, "The actions of a prince should be so regulated that he may be able at any time to change his course and yet not lose the respect of men. But to change course with respect, you must first build competence in secrecy. If people only know your intentions, they will sabotage your execution. The moment they sense your rise threatens their position." Let me show you how this plays out in real life. Take the young lawyer who wants to make partner. She could post on LinkedIn about her ambition, join mentorship circles, and network at every happy hour. Or she could spend 18 months quietly mastering procedural loopholes, studying deposition transcripts late at night, volunteering for the least glamorous cases. Just to learn how senior partners think in crisis, the boy chooses option 1 and gets labeled eager but scattered. The man, yes, even when she is a woman, chooses option 2, and when the firm faces a high-stakes malpractice suit, she is the only one who catches the statute of limitations error. No one knew she had been studying it for months, but in that moment she does not need to explain her worth. It is demonstrated, irrefutably. Here is what happens when you prepare in public. You invite interference. Early praise inflates your ego. Premature criticism deflates your resolve. And worst of all, you begin to perform instead of produce. You start editing your work for likes, not impact. You shorten your runs because the GPS watch died. You skip the cold shower because no one is filming. Discipline becomes conditional on witness. Most people announce goals because they mistake declaration for commitment, but declaration leaks intention, and intention without execution is just noise. The boy says, "I am writing a book," and spends weeks tweaking his author bio. The man says nothing and finishes chapter 1 in 30 days, not because he has more time, but because he has fewer distractions. Instead of posting, "I am leveling up," you disappear for 6 weeks and return with a certification. Instead of saying, I am rebuilding my confidence. You stop correcting people who mispronounce your name. Instead of promising, I will start my business next quarter, you incorporate quietly and run your first pilot with 3 paying clients. Before telling a soul, in personal development, this is even more critical. The boy tells his friends he is working on his temper, then vents about his boss the next day, contradicting his own growth. The man practices breathwork in the car before responding to a provocation. He journals not to vent, but to trace patterns. He notices he snaps most when he is hungry or when his father's voice echoes in his head, and he adjusts accordingly, not for applause, but for alignment. What happens when you master this is unshakable presence. People begin to sense your depth without you proving it. You walk into a room, and others lean in, not because you shouted your resume, but because your stillness implies substance. But here is the boundary. Never isolate so completely that you cut off all feedback loops. Solitude is for building, not for hiding. At the right moment, when the foundation is solid, you bring trusted eyes in not to approve, but to pressure test. Remember, the crown is heavy because it was cast in silence, not in spectacle. You understand that every step upward draws fire, not because you did something wrong, but because you violated the unspoken rule. Stay small and safe. The boy takes criticism personally. He reads a snide comment on his post and wonders, did I overshare? Was I too proud? Did I offend someone? He tries to shrink back into neutrality to regain approval. But the man knows the arrow was not aimed at his character. It was aimed at his altitude, Machiavelli once said. It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one of the two must be wanting. But let us be precise here. He does not mean terror. He means respect, earned through unassailable competence. And the moment you become undeniable, some people will resent you, not for your cruelty, but for your clarity, because your success holds up a mirror to their compromises. Let me give you a concrete example. A woman I coached launched a newsletter with 500 subscribers. She wrote twice a week, no ads, no hype, just sharp insights on behavioral economics. After 8 months, she hit 20,000 subscribers and landed a book deal within a year. The praise poured in. But so did the whispers behind closed Zoom screens. She overheard a former colleague say, "Yeah, well, she got lucky, the timing was perfect." Or someone commented on LinkedIn, "Your tone feels aggressive, not collaborative." Notice how neither critique addressed her work. It attacked her tone, her luck, her right to stand where she stood. That is not feedback. That is friction from the system, trying to drag her back into alignment. Here is what happens when you rise in any domain. Career, art, leadership. You stop being judged by your output and start being judged by your audacity. The boy panics when he hears envy disguised as concern. Your success is great, but are you burning out? Or, I just worry you are changing. He mistakes poison for care and starts over-explaining his choices. The man hears the same words and recognizes the subtext. I am uncomfortable with your freedom, and I want you to feel guilty for having it. Most people try to neutralize envy by downplaying their wins. They say it was a team effort. When they led every meeting, they deflect compliments with, "Oh, it was not that big a deal," or laugh nervously when praised. But this does not disarm the envious, it invites further testing, because ambiguity signals insecurity, and insecurity is an open invitation to challenge your position. Instead of softening your achievement, you anchor it in gratitude without apology. I am grateful for the opportunity and proud of the work. Instead of avoiding the spotlight, you occupy it with humility but not shame. You do not say sorry for the win. You say thank you for witnessing it. In professional settings, this is critical. The boy gets promoted and immediately starts doing favors for the people who voted against him, trying to prove he is still one of them. The man accepts the title, then doubles down on excellence, not to spite them, but to remove all doubt. He knows the only antidote to skepticism is irrefutable results. What happens when you master this is immunity. You stop scanning for approval and start scanning for alignment. You learn to distinguish between constructive critique from mentors who want you to level up and corrosive commentary from observers who want you to kneel back down. And you respond accordingly. One gets your attention, the other gets your silence, but here is the warning. Never let envy make you cynical or secretive about your joy. Share your wins with those who celebrate you, not to boast, but to reinforce the belief that elevation is possible. Remember, envy is not a sign you went too far. It is proof you finally left the basement. You do not ask who likes you, you ask who benefits from your success. And structure every interaction around mutual gain, not emotional dependency. The boy enters every relationship hoping to be chosen, to be the favorite, the confidant, the indispensable one. He gives time, energy, favors, access to his network, without ever clarifying what reciprocity looks like. He believes loyalty is built on shared memories, but the man knows loyalty is sustained by shared incentives. Machiavelli once said, "Men forget more easily the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony." He is not saying people are heartless. He is saying self-interest is the most reliable predictor of behavior. And when you design your alliances around that truth, you stop being shocked when people vanish at the first sign of cost. Let me show you how this plays out in reality. A young entrepreneur I mentored partnered with a friend to launch a side hustle. They split costs 50-50, shook hands, and got to work. But within 6 months, tensions flared. The friend missed deadlines, asked for extensions, then grew defensive when results lagged. The boy would have taken it personally, internalized the failure, and blamed himself for not being supportive enough. The man pulled the financials and discovered his partner was using company funds to cover personal debt, not out of malice, but necessity. And that changed everything. He did not rage. He renegotiated. He offered a buyout at fair value with a clean exit, no blame, no drama, just recalibration. Because he understood this was never about betrayal, it was about mismatched stakes. Here is what happens when you confuse alliances with friendships. You grant access before establishing alignment. You let someone into your inner circle because they made you laugh once or shared a hardship. And then you are shocked when they leak your idea to a competitor or gossip about your breakup to mutual friends, the boy says. But we have known each other since high school, as if time is a substitute for trustworthiness. But time only proves exposure, not integrity. Most people wait for others to prove loyalty before setting terms. But by then, the damage is already done. The man sets the terms early, not with contracts necessarily, but with clarity. If we collaborate, I expect weekly updates and shared decision rights on budget. If I refer clients to you, I need to know your onboarding process so I can vouch credibly. If we are building something together, I need to understand your risk tolerance, your timeline, and your exit plan. Instead of saying, "I have got your back no matter what," he says, "I have got your back as long as we are moving in the same direction." Instead of assuming shared values, he tests them in low-stakes scenarios. He delegates a small task, observes how it is handled, notes whether the person takes ownership or makes excuses. In professional networks, this is non-negotiable. The boy joins masterminds and gives away his best frameworks, hoping goodwill will return the favor. The man shares values strategically, a single insight that opens the door, then waits to see if the other person reciprocates with depth or just takes and disappears. He builds alliances like a portfolio, diversified not by industry, but by reliability, by consistency, by proof of follow-through. What happens when you master this is efficiency. You stop wasting years on one-sided relationships. You attract partners who are as invested in the outcome as you are, because you have made investment the price of entry. And paradoxically, your relationships deepen not because you demand affection, but because you eliminate the emotional labor of managing disappointment. But here is the boundary. Never reduce every human connection to pure utility. Keep space for genuine friendship, but know the difference. Do not bring your best friend into your business unless they have proven themselves in the arena first. Remember, an alliance is not a promise of forever. It is a commitment to mutual advancement for as long as the mission holds. You stop waiting for justice and start engineering advantage. You do not rage at the rigged game. You learn its rules, then change them from within. The boy scans the world. For balance, he expects effort to equal reward, loyalty to equal protection, honesty to equal safety. And when it does not, he collapses into cynicism or despair. But the man knows fairness is not a law of nature. It is a social fiction invented to pacify the masses and maintain order for those already in control, Machiavelli once said. It is necessary for a prince who wishes to maintain his position to learn how not to be good. Do not misunderstand him. He is not praising evil. He is exposing the fatal flaw of idealism in power dynamics. The moment you believe the system will reward virtue alone, you become its easiest target, because while you are waiting for your turn, the ruthless are studying the mechanics of ascent. Let me give you a real case. A software engineer spent 6 years at a tech firm, never missed a deadline, mentored juniors, stayed late during launches. When layoffs came, he was on the list, not because he underperformed, but because he never negotiated equity, never built external visibility, never made himself indispensable to revenue, only to workflow. The boy would call it unjust, and update his LinkedIn with bitter subtext. The man sees it as data. He understands that in corporate ecosystems, contribution is necessary, but visibility and leverage are decisive. And so he begins building all three in parallel. Here is what happens when you cling to fairness. You waste energy on moral outrage instead of strategic repositioning. You draft emails you never send, rehearse arguments you never voice, and seethe in silence while others move forward unburdened by your principles. The boy says, "It is not right that he got the promotion. He barely knows the product." The man asks, "What did he do that I did not network with the board?" Build a side prototype, secure a client testimonial. And then he closes the gap, not with complaint, but with execution. Most people confuse fairness with equality. But equality is a myth in any competitive arena. Some start with generational wealth, some with trauma, some with mentors, some with none, and the game does not pause to level the field. The man does not deny inequality. He exploits asymmetry. He knows that being underestimated is a tactical advantage. He lets others assume he is naive while he maps their weaknesses. He allows them to speak first in meetings, knowing their overconfidence will reveal their assumptions. Instead of demanding the rules change, he learns how to play within them so well that he earns the right to rewrite them. Instead of protesting that funding goes to flashy ideas, not solid ones, he packages his solid idea with a compelling narrative, a prototype, a pilot metric, a bold headline not to deceive, but to translate truth into the language power understands. In personal life, this is just as vital. The boy stays in a one-sided friendship because he remembers the good old days and believes effort should eventually be returned. The man measures current behavior, not past sentiment, and withdraws attention proportionally, not out of spite, but out of calibration. He knows affection without reciprocity is not love, it is habit, and habits can be broken. What happens when you master this is liberation. You stop keeping score of who owes you and start investing only where returns are probable. You become calm in chaos because you no longer expect the world to be rational. You expect it to be opportunistic, and you meet it on those terms. But here is the warning. Never let this insight turn you cruel or exploitative. Fairness may be an illusion, but integrity is real. You do not cheat. You do not lie. You do not harm, but you do prepare. You do position. You do protect. Remember, the game was never fair. The prize goes not to the most deserving, but to the most awake. You have just witnessed the 9 rites of rebirth, the funeral rites for the boy, and the coronation rites for the man. But knowledge without action is just another form of weakness. So here is your assignment. Pick one lesson, one only, and live it for 7 days. Not perform it, not theorize it. Live it. When someone interrupts you, let silence be your answer. When praise comes unearned, let it pass without correction. When pain rises, let it speak before you react. Do not try to master all at once. Mastery begins with repetition, not volume. And remember this, these tools are not weapons. They are armor. Use them to defend your dignity, not to invade another's humanity. The world does not need more predators. It needs more unbreakable people. People who cannot be bought, manipulated, or broken because they buried their weakness long ago. There are 2 kinds of people, the manipulator and the unmanipulatable. One seeks to control others. The other seeks to master the self. This is not about kneeling or making others kneel. It is about standing so firmly that no storm can force you down. Which kind of person do you choose to be? If this struck something deep in you, hit like right now, not for me, for the version of you that finally said, enough. Subscribe and tap the bell, because the next lesson cuts even deeper. And in the comments, tell me one sentence that hit you hardest. Was it the burial or the birth? Now go stand in your power. Stay strategic, stay ethical, stay powerful.